right, kia ora, g'day. Welcome back here with the second question out of the 11 that was sent through to me on reintegration by a current serving corrections officer who's got about 7 years experience looking at getting into or potentially transitioning into reintegration at some stage, and or maybe more focused primarily working with youth. So they sent me through a awesome list of questions. I answered those over 2 or 3 live sessions before. They've since come back, said, "Oh, it would be good if I was able to put these, put my responses into a dedicated response to each question." So, trying to do that now. This is only the second one, and the second question reads: "What is the very first boundary you establish when taking over a potential chaotic or high risk environment like a reintegration service?" Holy heck! I know I answered that question. Now I am completely blank in terms of what I might have said. So it'll be somewhere in the channel, going back a week or two. First boundary you established when taking over a potential chaotic or high risk environment like a reintegration service. I guess, I don't know if it's so much of a boundary. It's probably, I would say I'm not really looking to set any boundaries straight away when as based on your question here, very first boundary you established when taking over a potentially chaotic. So, looking to step into the role that I was fortunate to be awarded as the service manager role for the reintegration service over in the Hut, in Lower Hut. I don't know that I had any boundaries as such. If anything, my first port of call was just looking to try to get a sense and a feel for what has been done in the past, where things are at, or probably more so where things are at right, say now, if I was going into that place day one. What are the staff like, the people like, what's the feeling like, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know that I would call those boundaries, but I'll try and come to your point in terms of, there were boundaries that were put in place later on. But that's probably the first part, getting a feel. Whether or not people consider that a boundary or not, I don't. I just think that's trying to come in and get a sense of what everything, what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, smells like, all that sort of stuff with regards to the new environment that at that time that I was stepping into. So I hadn't done previous reintegration work before, hadn't worked specifically, not to that level, with working with prisoners or people, sorry, they're not prisoners anymore, people that have been in and out of the prison system for long periods of time and for repeated periods of time. I hadn't done anything like that on that, like that size, that scale, that process, etc. So that was new to me. And yeah, so that's probably the first thing that I would look at. In terms of your boundaries specific, again, I tried to minimize the amount of boundaries that I had. So my door was always open unless it was closed for when I was in a meeting or a private one-to-one with either a staff member or one of the men, or a meeting with corrections or whatever. But other than that, my door was open. So staff could come in, men could come in at any time. If they wanted to close the door because they needed time with me privately to talk about whatever, then I'd leave that up to them. If they were happy to have the door open and have the conversation, because it's like in a home. So in the corridor, what would have been the bedrooms were turned into our offices. And so, people, other offices, other bedrooms, which were the other offices, people are in those, and our doors are generally open. And so people can, let me just turn that off. Well, I'll leave it. And so people can, what's the name? Hear what's going on. So again, staff, men, corrections, usually corrections, the doors were closed for the most part, because there's some sensitive, confidential stuff that they're talking about in regards to the men. Other than that, door was always open. So I don't know that that was a boundary. Tried to reduce and minimize the boundaries, as I mentioned. The other parts, I suppose, when you're talking boundaries specific, though, that's where we got into things like the tikanga and the kawa, or the rules and, the do's and don'ts of the whare. And those things range from a whole bunch of things. So I recognized and saw that there were what I believed to be gaps at the time in terms of what was happening, and the way that men that were coming into the service were taking advantage of the service itself, of the staff, of the nature of what it was that we were trying to do. trying to manipulate things to their advantage, and it sometimes just flat out just being really entitled and being acting as if the world owes them something, or acting as if we owe them something. So those things needed to be, sorted out as soon as we could. And so we started with things like the curfew. Curfew was put in place for all the men, and we spoke about all the stuff, all the rules and the do's and don'ts for the whare with the men while we we're going through that assessment process, which I'll get to and talk about later, probably not in this question, and another one later on. So we go through that. There's things around curfew. There's things around their probationary requirements. There's weird conditions and rules around their communication, both written or like email, I should say, mobile text messages, like phone calls and text messages, just to keep us in the loop, especially if they were going to be late or, not be able to meet one of the requirements. Like we needed to know in advance, not just rock up when you want and then try to come up with an excuse after, or just disregard the rules altogether. Things around alcohol and drugs, which were automatic no's, random drug and alcohol testing, all of this stuff was spoken about. Anybody wanting to come to us that was previously affiliated with a gang needed to be willing to leave that gang life behind. And if they had gang-related facial tattoos or hand tattoos, then they needed to be willing and agree to having them removed. So the laser treatment, having them lasered off. So we were and that's just some of the stuff, right? We had quite a long list. Obviously, no violence and aggression things in there. Weaved into all of that were a bunch of automatic, you're out of here, like I'm going to exit you. And sadly had to do that a few times, not for violence and stuff though, other things. So curfew breaches and drugs and alcohol testing positive and all that sort of stuff. So where am I going with it? To your question around boundaries, having some clear boundaries in terms of what we wanted to have to protect not only the other men in the service, the men that were genuine, to protect the staff, all of us in the staff, to protect our community. Those things we needed to have in place. So we looked at and identified some gaps that weren't really being adhered to. And when things or if and when there were certain rules in place, there wasn't really a punishment. It was like what was the term that they used? Loss of privileges, I think was the term, which was what they used in prison, which just meant they couldn't buy stuff from a kiosk or something, or shop or whatever. And some of the guys that had breached, they were then just confined to staying in their accommodation at the house. I was like, it's pretty, person's done some pretty rubbish stuff, and all we're doing is saying like a little home detention for a day or two. To me, it didn't feel like that would be enough to help these men understand the importance of and or hold them to account in relation to what it is that they've said that they want to do, which is make a change and get out of the cycle and reconnect with their family, with their children, get a job, get their licenses, some stuff that we might take for granted, but there was a heck of a lot of that. So they may not sound like big, important things, but they actually are. And we know that, and the men coming into the service or wanting to come to the service understood that too. So, that's where I talk about and spoke about before. They'll tell you things that they believe that it is they'll tell you things that they think it is that you want to hear, in the hopes of making them look, sound better, and be a more of an appealing prospect to come to your service. So those boundaries, the assessment and all that sort of stuff is really important. But the boundaries that I just mentioned, or rules and guides, whatever you want to call them, do's and don'ts, they're critical. I don't know that I can't remember the first one that we went off, but probably curfew was probably one of the main ones that I saw stand out. Drinking and alcohol, which probably would lead to drugs, gang affiliations. Those things just sort of hit me right in the eyeballs when I got there, because you can see it very clearly. And so I wanted to make sure that wasn't happening. Another thing that sort of hit me was the care and maintenance of their homes. The homes are beautiful, brand new homes, nice landscaping, beautiful homes inside. So the need to look after those homes. So house inspections were a thing. Some of the stuff people might have looked at and gone, oh man, he's running it like it's an army base. No, not running it like an army base, but treating the facilities that we have with the respect that you would expect soldiers to treat their space, their barrack block, their rooms, etc., etc. their equipment. So especially considering that the program is 18 months, well, it was 18 months, I'm not sure how long it is now, 18 months up to 2 years at the time, whereby men could come, be in the service and have a really good amount of time to just reset their feet, get educated, more educated, get some qualifications and skills up, and get to a stage where they're ready to launch from into their own independent living or reconnect with their family. So it's it's an awesome kaupapa, or it's an awesome service, and the rationale behind it is pretty cool as well. So there's lots to work in the advantage of the individual if they want to, if they're genuine, if they're tika and pono, if they're true and being honest about what it is that they want to do. Otherwise, if they're just being a bloody toe jam, well, apply to somewhere else. So that's probably all I would say for that one. I think I probably rambled on longer in the first time I answered this question. Potentially chaotic or high risk environment like a reintegration service. Yeah, heaps of stuff. Observe, get a sense and feel for how things are in summary, and then the gaps that I identified, being a fresh set of eyes coming into it, then pulled the team together, then went through. I felt like I needed to provide suggestions and provide the rationale as to why, get the team's buy-in. Did they agree? Did they disagree? If not, if they didn't agree, then why not? Like, what am I missing? What can we do better, etc. And there was some really good conversation. We eventually got to a stage where we agreed on everything. We had that. And later on, we had opportunities to improve from things that we were learning. So we all got together again, then we reviewed that. And as we did that as a staff, we then extended that. I felt it was important to extend that to the men that were in the service so that they had a voice to it as well. And so that they didn't constantly have this feeling of things just being done to them. We wanted them to know that they were a part of this service, part of the family. And being part of a family, you get to have a voice in terms of what you think should or shouldn't happen. And so that's what we tried to do, and that is what we did do, I should say. So hopefully that helps. That's it for this second question. What is the very first boundary you establish when taking over a potentially chaotic or high risk environment like a reintegration service? And hopefully that gives a little bit of an insight. I could yap on about each of these questions for ages, but I will cut that there, and I'll see you on the next one.